How's it going, everyone? This is Scott Takai, and welcome back to another cinematography breakdown episode where I break down my work as a DP from a lighting and camera perspective. In this episode today, I'm going to be going over corporate interviews and lighting them more on a contrasty cinematic side. Okay, so the first setup that we're going to be going over is the setup where the CEO is sitting in this chair next to their brand mascot, which is the teddy bear right here. And in this interview, I ended up setting up 3 different lights. And the first light that was set up is the Aperture 300D Mark II, which is going to be the light that's key lighting him right here. And I also have the Light Dome Mark II. That's usually what I use whenever I'm shooting stuff like this. And inside of the Light Dome, they have these 2 diffusion filters. One of them is like a thinner white, and then the other one is a thicker white. So what I ended up doing, since it's the 300D and has a lot more extra power, and I wanted to just soften the light as much as possible, I ended up putting both of those filters on. And I believe I also added the honeycomb grid just so I can have extra control over the light spill and just have it a lot more focused onto his face. And using all 3 of those filters that come with the Light Dome is going to kill off a lot of the intensity of the light that you're putting it on. So that's why I chose to use the 300D, because being a more powerful light, you have a little bit more flexibility for when you're putting on those filters, as opposed to if you're doing the same thing with something a little bit weaker like the 120D Mark II. So I ended up using it to key light his face right here, and as you can see, it's very soft in the roll off right here. We have a very nice little eye light in his eye that's coming from the Light Dome Mark II. When you have a bigger source of light, the more prominent the eye light is going to be. Before I set up any lights, what I normally do is I try to see what everything looks like if I were to just turn off all of the house lights in the room. And in this particular instance, the house lights within this room were actually orange, and I wanted to keep everything more daylight and have a little bit of orange contrast from those lights. The client ended up not wanting to see the actual light fixture that's behind him, which is off camera, around here somewhere. Even though you don't really see it in the frame, what I ended up doing was having a Nanlite Pavo tube set to 2700 Kelvin, and it's above his head right here, and that's what's giving this nice little hair light onto his head. I always prefer having some color contrast in my shots with the color temperatures. I normally prioritize daylight because all of my lights are daylight, and also I just think it looks a lot more natural than using orange light and then adjusting the white balance to tungsten, and it gives this nice little warmth to the shot, as you can see on his hair right here. And then lastly, I have the background light, which is pretty much just filling in the background right here. That's just an Aperture 120D Mark II aimed directly at the ceiling, and then just filling in the room as much as possible, because if I didn't have that light, because I turned off all the house lights, this room would actually be dark in the background. It would just be him right in the front, and then it just wouldn't have that much depth or friendliness or that kind of clean corporate feel to it. So adding that light in the background and then making it so it's a lower intensity than his face just helps it pop a little bit more without making it look too dark and contrasty. So having that background light on will give you different looks depending on how intense the light itself is. So in this case, I kind of just made it a little bit darker than his face. That way he can pop a lot more. If I had made the background brighter, then there would be less depth and less separation between the subject and the background. So that's when the intensity of the light in the background really comes in handy and helps you add that extra contrast and depth to the shot. I also drew out this little diagram just to help with making it a little bit more visual on what I'm talking about. So this is a diagram of the entire room that I was working in, and we had placed the talent in between these 2 walls, and basically we were just dollying back and forth on the Dana dolly just to make the shot feel more dynamic and not make it feel so static. As you can see right here, this is the 300D that I was telling telling you about. And then it's going to be key lighting his face from here. And then slightly off camera, above the frame, I have the Nanlite Pavo tube set up on a C-stand, like right behind this wall. And that's going to be giving him that warmth that's on the back of his head in the backlight. And then here's the table that was behind him. And then over here in the corner, that's where I have the Aperture 120D lighting up the background. Okay, so the next setup that I have at this shoot is pretty much the exact same thing. The only thing that's really changed is the background, but I'm gonna go over it anyway. So in this setup, exact same thing. We have the 300D that's key lighting him. And one of the differences between this shot and the previous shot is that the shadows are a lot more contrasty in this shot versus this shot. So one of the reasons for that is because in this shot right here, he's actually pretty close to a wall on camera right, and it's a white wall. Being a white wall and the light being pointed at it, the white wall is going to end up bouncing a lot of the light onto the shadow side of his face, so making it a little bit more filled in. Versus in this shot, the shadows are a lot more contrasty because there is no white wall on the right side bouncing off of the light. If anything over here, it's pretty much just darkness. There's no actual object that's close to him that can bounce off any sort of light, so it's gonna have a much more contrasty effect. So that's one of the reasons too why you kind of want to keep in mind like how close you are to walls or how close you are to white objects in general. It's not something that I did intentionally. I would have preferred the shadows to be a little bit more filled in here, but we're running short on time. This was actually a setup that we were kind of just scrambling to do, so just left it as it is. So anyway, I have the 300D key lighting his face, and then I have my trusty Nanlite backlighting the back of his head right here and giving a little bit of a rim on the back of his head. That way the shadows isn't just falling into complete darkness, kind of like how my face is right here. I also love having practical lights on in the background, so you can't really see it in this frame too much, but I have a lamp that I turned on in the background, and that kind of helps with the motivation of the backlight that's hitting him right here. And overall, since I'm shooting in daylight and just having some colors in the background, like it makes it look more visually appealing to me. That's pretty much what I'm doing in this setup right here. And then I have the 300D placed at a 45-degree angle. That way I can get some of the Rembrandt lighting, something that I'm always trying to go for when I'm lighting faces. So that's the video for today, guys. Something short and sweet. And if you like the content, be sure to like and comment on the video below to let me know that you enjoy watching this video. Be sure to subscribe to the channel for more filmmaking related content. And as always, have an amazing day. I'll see you guys later.